Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe. I'm very excited to welcome Izzy from the Be Kind Rewind YouTube channel for this special episode today, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Cabaret, released in February of 1972. How are we doing, Izzy?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for being back. We talked about Klute last summer. So if the actor won Best Actress at the Academy Awards, I feel like I have to have Izzy on to talk about the movie. Obviously, you made a fantastic video about Liza Minnelli's win here, and wanted to have you on to discuss this really incredible film that I have not seen in 18 years until 2 nights ago.
Wow, 18 years. Yeah, I feel like I've seen this movie so many times. It's like, I genuinely think it's probably my favorite or second favorite movie. So, I mean,
wow. Okay.
To spoil things, I have literally nothing negative to say about this movie at all.
That's awesome. So what can you tell me, when did you first see this film? Like, when did this first pop up in your life?
Wow, I don't actually know. When I first saw it, I know that I was aware of it.
Okay.
When I was like at least 10, because I remember when I saw Chicago for the first time, I remember thinking, oh, this is like Cabaret, but I don't even know if I'd seen Cabaret at that point. So
okay.
I just feel like it's been around or in my consciousness somehow forever.
Yeah, my creative writing teacher, my senior year of high school, introduced us to this movie. Part of the class, we did fiction, poetry, and film. One of the last films he showed us was Cabaret. And I just fell in love with it. Like, even though he showed us the movie on a very small screen, circa 2003,
Mm-hmm.
you could tell there was something about this movie that was very unique and, very stylish and really powerful. And I don't know what happened, but I have not revisited this movie in the last 18 years. Was very excited to watch it again. It was almost like watching a new movie. I remembered a couple things here and there, but it was kind of like watching it for the first time. And boy, what an extraordinary experience I just had a couple nights ago.
Yeah, no, I'm curious to hear what it's like to see it for essentially the first time in 2022.
Yeah, because when my memory of it was there was a lot more singing and dancing, and I was watching it and I was like, oh, there's a lot of non-musical sequences in this movie. There's a lot of it's the dramatic tension between Sally and Brian and their story, and bringing in Maximilian. And we of course other characters. We've got Joel Grey's character, who is so fantastic in this, and we have Natalia, and we have all these interesting characters. And I was like, wow, I remembered it being more of like a wall-to-wall musical, and it's not. Kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like that was also just very intentional on Fosse's part, because 1970, what is this, 1972?
Yeah.
Not a big year or era for the movie musical. And so he definitely put a lot of thought into how to adapt it to make it feel modern and new. And I think it's probably the best example that's ever been done of that.
Yeah, I watched one of the documentaries on the Blu-ray, and they were talking about how this was kind of like the first adult musical, especially of the new era of like post 1968, when there were R-rated films. You can have adult themes. Before this, we're getting like Fiddler on the Roof, Scrooge, and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which I love. But this kind of musical hadn't really been done before, and so this was kind of like a fresh new take on the genre, which was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably grows out of West Side Story more than a Gene Kelly musical or something like that. But yeah, definitely some seeds were planted for it to exist, I think.
Gene Kelly, who a few people involved with this movie, they wanted him to direct Cabaret. Did you know that?
I did, and that would have been a huge mistake.
What would this movie have looked like with Gene Kelly behind the camera? I don't know.
I don't know. That would be I don't want to see it personally. No offense to Gene Kelly or his direction.
So Bob Fosse, of course, directed this. His first feature film that he had directed was the Shirley MacLaine film, Sweet Charity, I believe it was called, which came out in 1969 or 68, one of those 2 years. And that was not a big hit. That was a flop. And so he was struggling to find work, at least at the film level. And it took the producer, Cy Feuer, to recommend Bob Fosse for this, because not a lot of people wanted him to direct Cabaret.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. So what does Bob Fosse bring to this movie? Like what kind of stamp do you think he puts on Cabaret?
I think Bob Fosse is a very, maybe not cynical is the right word, but he sort of has a grittier perspective on life than, let's say, I guess Gene Kelly is a good example, since he might have directed this movie. I just feel like he's very in tune with, and a lot of the themes of his works in film and on stage are about like decadence and sort of like this intersection of glamour and like the worst of humanity. And Cabaret is obviously quite a lot about that.
Yeah.
And so I think what he brings to it is this sense of like the irony of those things interacting, and sort of, I think his knowledge of cinematic history and sort of the imagery that he's attracted to works really well with sort of a late 20s, early 30s Berlin aesthetic. If you watch, for example, Marlene Dietrich in The Blue Angel, that club scene is very, or that cabaret is very like dingy, looks a little DIY, so to speak. And I think he sort of elevates that look, but sort of brings it more into like a mysterious modern setting, which I really like. And I think he just sort of understands how to make things strange and scary, but also attractive. It's like it's a balancing act constantly with him.
Yeah, there is a strangeness to some of this, especially the scenes with Joel Grey, but he also really takes care of the human element. He pulls you into the story. He makes you care about these people. It's not just all flash and dazzle the whole way through. Like he really does. He has that ability to really put you in the middle of a musical sequence, but then he'll also have these quiet scenes where he's not afraid to let the camera stay on an actor for 30 seconds plus. He's not editing every 5 seconds, like he has that balance there, which I think helps the movie a lot.
Yeah, and I think the editing is and I think 30% of the reason I like this movie is because of the editing. It's just so brilliant the way that he's so aware of like, I'm going to put you in the middle of a Liza Minnelli movie or song that you're absolutely going to jive to, and it's going to feel like the coolest thing in the planet. And then the next second, I'm going to show you like the worst, like Nazi thug, beating somebody up on the street. It's so jarring, and it's very strange to be like pulled out of that fantasy so quickly. And I think sort of understanding that duality of like escape and what is so tempting about decadence is the strength of this movie, and the editing really adds to that for me.
Oh, there are some striking moments of the editing. There's a part where it's like on Liza Minnelli's like her profile, and it fades into the same shot, but it's her at the club. And the way that contrasts the previous scene where it was much like quieter, like in the bedroom, like it was really striking. I like went, whoa, I rewound the movie and watched that again because it was so like well done and like so well composed, and the way the editing kind of helped kind of show us, like it almost like took us into her mind in that moment, which is really cool. So yeah, the editing in here, which won the Academy Award. We should say this movie won 8 Academy Awards. It is the record holder for most Academy Awards won by a movie that did not win Best Picture. The Godfather won Best Picture, but only won 3 awards.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know, probably unpopular opinion, but I think it should have won Best Picture. But...
Well, I mean, how do you award a movie with 8 and not? I mean, it's happened before. What did Gravity? I think won 7 and then didn't win Picture. So like it happens. Like a movie wins a lot, at the technical level. But I feel like giving this movie director and actress and supporting actor showed just like an intense love
And
for the film.
cinematography. Yeah.
Cinematography.
I mean, like all the big ones pretty much. It's kind of
So
nuts. Yeah.
so that's interesting. That's interesting that they would have gone with The Godfather for picture. I mean, obviously that's a great film, and so in the hindsight of history, it makes sense that The Godfather would have won picture. But you think The Godfather would have picked up a few other awards in the ceremony for it to
Yeah.
guarantee that best picture win. But really interesting. And like I was looking at all the different nominees and the awards of this one, and they all make sense. I mean, how do you not give this movie Best Actress for Liza Minnelli?
Yeah,
Right?
I know. It's I think it might be one of my favorite wins ever because it just makes so much sense to me. Like it's just yeah, it's intuitive, absolutely
Yeah.
easy.
So she had been
Easy.
nominated once before for The Stairwell Cuckoo from
Mhm.
1969, which is a really great film. It actually was one of my favorite discoveries of when I looked at films from 50 years before. In 2019, I looked at some 69 films before I was doing the podcast. And like that was a great performance that she gave in that movie. And it's
Mhm.
so different than the one she gives here. This one's much more adult. And
Mhm.
you can imagine that when she took on Cabaret, she knew that this was going to be a star making role, right? Like, so like she probably had that in her head, and she just gives it 110% in every scene. She is on another level in this movie. She's amazing.
Yeah, one of my proudest moments as an individual, I forced all of my friends to go watch this with me on my birthday once.
Oh, okay.
And one of my friends had never seen it before. And when she left, she was like, "Oh, I get why people like Liza Minnelli now." Because she doesn't know. She doesn't like she's not a big movie person. She's just there because she's a good friend.
Yeah.
But I was like, wow, see the magic of cinema.
Yeah. No, she's great. I mean, yeah, I think if someone was not like familiar with Liza Minnelli's work, I think this is the film to show them. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, you're just not going to get better than this.
Yeah, this is her. I mean, she is like just strikingly beautiful in this movie, and she's funny and she's sassy, but very real. There's that scene at the end when she's crying in front of Brian. It is just such an incredible performance. And I mean, she had some heavy hitters for the best actress category, as of course you covered in your wonderful video. But
Mm-hmm.
she was up against Diana Ross, Maggie Smith, Cicely Tyson, Liv Ullmann. And so it wasn't, I mean, would you say it was a given that she was going to win this? I mean, none of those other four films I feel like were as major players, right?
Probably not in the sense that, I mean, I think if your name is Liza Minnelli and you look exactly like Judy Garland, um, like there's a certain level of expectations that comes with
Yeah,
any
exactly.
performance that you give, um, in a way that, let's say, like, I don't know, a Liv Ullmann might not.
Mm,
Like, I think I don't remember who won the Critics Awards that year, and I wouldn't be surprised if Liv picked up a couple of
mm.
them, because people love her. I love her.
Yeah.
But The Immigrants is a really hard movie to watch. It's
Mm.
just so long, and it's about like Swedish farmers,
Oh
which is
my
just
gosh.
simply not as entertaining of a concept, I
Yeah.
guess. So
Yeah, my rule is I have to do an episode on any of the five movies that was nominated for Best Picture. The Immigrants was nominated. I looked it up and I was like, this one could be a little rough, but we'll see.
yeah, yeah, it's tough.
Yes. It won't be as much fun as Cabaret, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like Cabaret is all like fun, but it's also not fun in a lot of ways too,
Yeah.
which is kind of why I like it.
So something that I found really interesting, I did not know this, that the film in some ways was based on the stories of Christopher Isherwood, like
Mm-hmm.
his stories. So it was like there were like a few different versions of this, right? Before Cabaret like became what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So Isherwood's semi-autobiographical book, The Berlin Stories, it led to like another film that was on this kind of similar subject matter, and then it became the show, right?
Yeah. So it was a short story first
Mm-hmm.
about Sally Bowles,
Yeah,
which then went into the Berlin stories, which then became I Am a Camera, which is
that's right.
what's a play, I think, first,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
I think so. Yeah.
And then that was made into a movie. And then uh it was also made into the musical Cabaret, which is very different from the movie. And then they basically got rid of an entire subplot in the musical and added a bunch of new songs, and basically made it into the movie.
So the film finally came, many years after he had published his original story. But I just found that interesting. I love A Single Man and Christopher Isherwood's work, and I did not know until doing my research that like his work had inspired in some ways this movie, which is really cool. So as I said, Gene Kelly was considered to direct this, and also Billy Wilder.
Honestly, that might have been really cool.
Billy Wilder's Cabaret.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, I think that there's just so many through lines here that kind of, did I hit my microphone again? I think there's a lot of through lines here that make a lot of sense for Billy Wilder specifically. So if you think about like Sally Bowles being interpreted as like, what's her name? Lulu. What's her name?
Which one?
Oh man, hold on.
You're good.
Louise Brooks. So if you think about like Sally Bowles being a Louise Brooks type character, and you think about like Berlin in the 20s, that's where Billy Wilder was when he was becoming a screenwriter for the first time, becoming, an artist for the first time. He talked a lot about that time in his life when he was working on A Foreign Affair with Marlene Dietrich. So it kind of makes sense. Like he was part of that scene. He's close to that scene. He left obviously because like he was a Jewish man in Berlin, like no, of course, he was saved for that reason. So because of Hollywood. So I think his exploration of that topic would be really, really interesting.
Yeah, I love the work of Billy Wilder. Sunset Boulevard is my favorite film. It's a movie. I could watch that movie every month and never get sick of it. I just love that movie. Did he make a musical, Billy Wilder? Can't think of one. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a.
Could you say Some Like It Hot is kind of a musical?
Yeah, you could kind of. Yeah, there's some musical numbers in that for sure. So yeah, I think he would have had this in him. I feel like a lot of people consider like the last decade of his work not his best. So I wonder if this movie maybe had been a little bit too late in his career for him to really pull off like one more masterpiece. I don't know.
Yeah. That's probably right. If this had been made maybe in the early 60s or something, it might have been a little different.
So we thankfully we got Bob Fosse. I think he was obviously the right choice for this. Other people considered for Sally were Jane Fonda. That would have been interesting. And now when it says considered, I mean, who knows? Like maybe it was just a name thrown once one day. Maybe it wasn't anything heavier than that. But I saw Julie Andrews was considered for this. Faye Dunaway.
Interesting. Okay.
No more that. Shirley MacLaine could have had Shirley back on after Sweet Charity. And Barbara Streisand were some names being thrown around. Yeah, Barbara Streisand. She's making a lot of films around this time, the early 70s. She's in one or two a year. So she was obviously very big at this time. I don't know if she would have been quite right for this role, but I mean, we'll never know.
It definitely would have been interesting given that like being Jewish was such a huge part of her identity as a star. And so to make this movie, obviously could have, I don't know what the commentary would have been, but it would have been interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah. And then the character of Brian, played by Michael York, great actor, Michael York. Other actors considered for that role were Malcolm McDowell, Timothy Dalton, Jeremy Irons, and Tim Curry. a young Tim Curry, 3 years before Rocky Horror Picture Show. I don't know. He's got such a striking look to him. I don't know if he would have been appropriate for Brian. I think Michael York is perfectly cast here. What do we think of Michael York in this movie?
Yeah, I think he has a kind of boyish intellectual charm about him that really works. He kind of looks like, well, does he? I think his hair looks like Christopher Isherwood's. That's what's reminding me of him.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kind of has a similarity in looks to Isherwood. Yeah. I really enjoy. Obviously, most of us know him if you grew up in the 90s, we know him from Austin Powers. Like that's like when I see his face, I think Austin Powers. But obviously a great actor over many decades. This is one of his best performances. And it's hard. I mean, I feel like some actors could have gotten lost in this movie because Liza Minnelli is so just energetic and so interesting all the way through. I feel like some actors could have gotten lost in the background and the shadows, but I feel like Michael York's performance really does come through, and the way the movie deals with his bisexuality and his love for her, but also feeling like something is not, something is left out of this relationship. Like all of his concerns and his worries, I think, comes through his performance. I think he's really terrific in this.
Yeah, and I think Liza Minnelli is really a generous cast member, like in the sense that I don't think I've ever seen anything of her where she's like steamrolling over people or like very clearly vying for the camera's attention in a way that's like aggressive.
Yeah, that's a great point. She's never like jumping into any frame and like pushing an actor out of it. Like she's absolutely, she's always like a give and take with other actors in the movie. She's never taking over the frame. Absolutely, that's a good point. So the character of Sally Bowles was based on Jean Ross, an aspiring actress and singer who worked as a cabaret singer in Berlin. I guess Minnelli made an attempt to meet with her after she was cast in the movie, but it didn't come to fruition. Before her death in 1973, Ross was constantly hounded by journalists about the film. And she's like, go away. I don't want to talk about this. Did you know that Minnelli, she auditioned for the show, but was rejected, right? Like she wanted to play it on stage and could never make it to the finals. But then she gets the part in the movie. And that's the part everyone remembers now, 50 years on.
Yeah, that's right.
So what did she not have to get on the stage show?
I don't know. I mean, they said it was experience, but at that point it's like she already had a Best Actress Tony, so I'm not really sure what other experience she would have needed, but sure. I'm glad it turned out how it turned out.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, right. Like the to be fair to whoever was casting at that time, she is kind of wrong for the musical as it's written, like as a stage show.
Okay.
Because it's more obvious in the stage show than in the movie, but Sally is supposed to be like very bad at her job. Like you're kind of supposed to cast somebody who can't sing and is sort of like delusional about wanting to be famous. And obviously it's kind of hard to believe that someone like Liza Minnelli would be bad at what she's trying to do. So it kind of makes sense, I think, in that context.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. She's not supposed to be a perfect singer, a perfect dancer. You're not supposed to believe that she could have it all, because throughout the film, she's like, I want to be a great actress, but I don't know if it's ever going to happen for me. And if it was too believable, you'd be like, wait, what? So yeah, that's a great point too. So let's kind of dive into the movie a little bit more. I have a couple more pieces of research, but we can kind of talk more about the movie. So, speaking of maybe like the first act, the first 30, 40 minutes of the movie, like what do you love in the beginning, the introductions to the characters? Like how do you think the movie works when it begins, like in the first few scenes?
I mean, I think the opening sequence when they sing Willkommen is probably, I don't know, one of the best openings like of any musical.
Yeah.
It's just very, I think it sets the tone for the movie really, really well. You kind of have this very silly, strange, like ambiguous MC character who's like never really defined and is sort of like excited by like vulgarity, I guess. And I think that's just so captivating to me. I love that. And then just contrasting it with like this young man with his eyes wide open, arriving in Berlin for the first time. And there's like such hope and promise, but then it's also like you're kind of aware the whole time that something is not going to turn out very well. And I just think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, it doesn't open with a scene where you're like, oh, I can just settle in. It's gonna be everyone's gonna be happy, everything's gonna be fine. There like a slightly ominous sense. There's not everything is going to be right in this world with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it interesting that the movie does not open with Liza Minnelli. She doesn't come into it for what, a few scenes. And when
Mm-hmm.
we're introduced to Liza, it's not on the stage. Like, she just opens the door. I was like, oh, that's an interesting choice.
She is on the stage during the opening number, but I love that she's hidden.
Right.
Like, it's that she works there, but it's very clear that it's like, this isn't her club. Like, she's not a headliner, you know what I mean? And I really like that she's just sort of like subtly there for like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And so when we meet her and she's sort of living in this dingy little apartment, it makes sense, right? Like, she's not famous. And I like that. I think it's really
Yeah,
smart.
her room is nicer than the one she gives to Brian. Brian's room is like just like a little bit. She's like, this is what you get. Sorry, take it or leave it.
Yep.
Yeah, but that opening shot of Joel Grey, like, I mean, have there been, as you said, it's one of your favorite scenes of the movie. Like, have there been like a more memorable opening shot of a movie than on his face through that like weird distortion? It's just so like
it's like through a glass.
Yeah, it captivates you just immediately. And we haven't talked about him much yet. Like, he is such an interesting, like, it's like his performance and his character. And like, what do you think Joel Grey brings to this movie? Like, what is his role here?
Well, I feel like the role of the MC is really interesting because now people, I don't get this debate, to be honest. I'm sure you've seen this on Twitter. Like, everybody's like, oh, a queer character, like he's canonically queer. Like, that's not, like, maybe, but I feel like that's just the Sam Mendes iteration of it that everybody saw and now thinks that it's like how the character was initially written. My understanding of it is like, he's just sort of like an embodiment of fascism.
Okay.
He is just sort of this ringleader for, morality's decline, basically. And I think the way that it's posed is really interesting to me because he is so fascinating and he's so attractive as like a figure, an entertainer, right? It's like you want to watch him and it's very like hypnotizing and fun and you want to be a part of his little party. And then slowly you realize like all of these kind of scary ideological moments are being introduced in his work. So he'll say like, oh, the gorilla that they bring on is Jewish. Do you know what I mean? It's like a slowly unveiling a very scary inside thing that doesn't matter. It's like, it doesn't matter what's going on in the club. He doesn't care who the audience is. As long as he's fine, it doesn't matter. As long as the club keeps going on, it doesn't matter. It's by the end, when all the Nazis are there and everything is basically the same, you're just like, oh shit, this is really sad and scary.
Do you think we needed to get more depth from him? Because he is kind of like he's kind of a visual figure. We don't really get any insight into him as a person. Do you think the movie needed that or no?
No,
not
I
at all.
actually prefer that we don't know anything about him because he's a symbol. He's like a I don't know how else to, a metaphor. I don't think it would be to treat him as like a person who is like, what's the origin story of the MC? It's like, who cares? That's not the point of his character in the story. The point of him is to like understand decadence and like salaciousness and like selfishness. So yeah, I much prefer not knowing anything about him.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Usually if you win an Academy Award for a performance, there's some sort of like humanity, you get something like introspective about the character, and he won Best Supporting Actor of the year. And there's not a scene where like we just sit with him, where we get to learn more about him. And that's a really cool like win that we don't see very often with the Academy. Usually, right, we get a little bit more detail about who they are as a person, and that wasn't the case here.
Yeah, and I think it's a testament to what he does,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, he really is just mostly introducing the show, right? And he's singing, but at the same time, I just feel like every single thing that he does as a performer has like two faces to it. On the one hand, he's an entertainer, but on the other hand, there is something very like haunting and scary
Right.
about what he's doing. Like, it doesn't seem fully on the level. It doesn't seem like he's just a guy who wants to have a good time. It seems like there's something else, like kind of malicious, like a malicious undercurrent, which I think is really hard to do, to like to be so captivating, but also like maybe a little scary at the same time.
Yeah. And yeah, it's almost, it gets a little bit more ominous as the movie goes on. I mean, we get that early, that money sequence with him. If you're watching, this is behind me, the image from that scene. He, song and dance with Minnelli. But then as we go on, we like each number gets exceedingly like a little bit creepier, right? Like as we get towards the end, and that really haunting final shot of the movie. So yeah, it's such a unique character that I'm happy that the Academy recognized it. I feel like if there was even just a little bit less love for the movie, that could have been a performance that could have been overlooked. So I really like that they went with him. I love the way that Bob Fosse uses the camera throughout the movie and in these early scenes. There's at one point I wrote down like it's almost like the camera's floating over the audience. Like it's just like the way he uses the camera, and especially in the musical numbers, is really fascinating, but not cutting too quickly, which can be an issue, especially in more modern musicals. I like when the camera is allowed to kind of flow and kind of sweep around, and so I like how he uses the camera too. Really fantastic.
I mean, that is also my number one annoyance about modern movie musicals, is like they never let you see the dancing. It's like they just put you on a crane and then cut 100 times, and it's so frustrating. I mean, obviously I think this has a lot to do with him being a choreographer. He knows exactly what he wants you to see in that dance. And so yeah, it's extremely creative and like meticulous, which I really love.
I mean, I think Spielberg's West Side Story did that pretty well. He wasn't cutting it too fast in the new one, and you made that fantastic comparison video between his version and the 61. And like, did you notice that at all in the Spielberg version? Like, I felt like he wasn't, especially the big numbers, he would let the camera kind of track with the actors, and I really admired that.
Yeah, like mostly yes. I felt like he didn't do that too much. I felt that like that a little bit during America.
Oh, okay.
But I think I'm also kind of just I feel a little spoiled by Robbins, where it really is almost just like, it's not one shot, but it feels like it, and there's very little, it's just in one location. So I think I've just have that one too much lodged in my brain to maybe judge it correctly.
Your video made me laugh when you at one point you said like I slowed motion this one shot down just because I only had a second of it. Like you put the text on the bottom of your video. Yeah. I laughed out loud at that. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Because you don't have
footage. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like
you are a superstar. I mean, you make these 30-40 minute plus videos, and I mean this one I'm like, how are you going to do that when there's not really footage available of the new and the way you do it? I'm like, I'm always just so amazed. It's fantastic. So back to Cabaret. So what do we think of the relationship between Sally and Brian, and how that evolves, and what do we make of this relationship between the two?
I mean, I guess what do you mean? What do we think of it? Like, how much do we believe it?
Yeah. Or do we believe them as friends? Do we believe them as lovers? Do we like where they end up in the end? Does that feel right to you?
It does. I mean, it kind of jives with like, obviously I spend a lot of time reading like biographies and stuff like that. It kind of just, it rung true to me in the sense of like, a lot of stories about queer men and women who like had at this time like a partner in life who they absolutely loved, and maybe not always in like a sexual way, but like a very romantic way. Sort of like, I don't, not necessarily marriages of convenience, but like truly caring for each other in a deep way, but not for life in the way that we might expect of certain couples or whatever. But yeah, I do believe them as like needing each other and learning from each other, but ultimately not being the right person for each other. If either of them, like, I'm not convinced Sally's the kind of person who like ends up with one man for the rest of her life, you know, but just like for that moment, that's what they needed to move on. And I think they're very believable in that sense.
Yeah, I think, you know, as a gay person, I was really interested in the Michael York character and, you know, in Brian, and how they treat his bisexuality in a 1972 film based in the year 1931. And like when she first kisses him, he has no reaction. And I thought that that's handled really well. But then they become, you know, very, very close. I don't know how long the timeline is of the movie. I couldn't quite tell like how much time is passing throughout the film, but it felt like they were with each other a significant amount. By the time he recognized that he had a connection with her to the point where he wanted to feel that intimacy. And the way that the movie progresses in that way, it always felt very natural. It felt very authentic. And I mean, I was surprised to read that Isherwood, did you see that quote on Isherwood where he's like, he feels like the worst part of the movie is its negative portrayal of homosexuality. He said the male lead is a bisexual Englishman who has an affair with Sally and later with one of Sally's lovers. His homosexual tendency is treated as an indecent but comic weakness to be snickered at, like bedwetting.
Yeah, I don't really feel that at all.
No, I feel like the movie, I feel like the screenplay and the direct, I feel like we it's not treated as something to be made fun of or snickered at, and like, oh, it's just like this, he fancies her and he's gonna just take her for a whirl for a few nights. Like like they have such a close connection that felt very authentic to me. And
Sally also accepts him
right
when he admits that he's also been sleeping with Max. She's like, oh yeah. So like that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing I wish the movie had dealt with his homosexual tendencies a little bit more, like maybe like one more scene with Maximilian and just the two of them, like maybe like a seduction scene or something that took it a little bit further, because you're kind of wondering, like, are the two men sleeping together, because they're very flirtatious. Doesn't at one point he like compliments his outfit or something? He's like, blue is your color, Maximilian says, and I went, okay.
Blue is the warmest color. That's right.
Blue is the warmest color. But when I was like, what parts did I remember from when I saw this movie at age 18? And screw Maximilian, I do. So do I. I was like, I remember that part. I remember the classroom erupted at that part, because like you feel like there is something happening behind the scenes. Or...
It's that champagne scene for sure.
And that later in the film, I just started clapping at that moment. Oh my God, because he's so reserved. Brian is so quiet and reserved, and for him to come out with that line, I was like, oh my God, good job, Brian. It's fantastic. But no, I disagree with Isherwood on that front. I feel like the movie deals with his sexuality in a way that I found really appropriate, especially to the time that the film was made, to the time period the movie is set in 1931. So I thought that worked really well.
I mean, I think it's interesting, like, to consider. I don't know what it would have been like to be Christopher Isherwood. Like, what if you were one of the only, not one of, I guess not the only, but one of the very few openly gay people in popular culture,
right?
Like living through the 30s, 40s, all the way up to the 70s. what would appropriate representation have looked like to you? Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
we can sort of look back on it and be like, oh, for us and like for that time period, yeah, that seems really good. But I wonder what his idea of appropriate would have looked like.
Yeah. I'm very interested in LGBTQ depictions on screen at this time in film history in the early 70s. There have been some good ones since I started the podcast about a year and a half ago. There's been some good ones and some not so good ones. And this is one of the better ones. Like, I really thought it worked well. So I was very happy to see that. Let's see. So anything else like has kind of going into the middle of the movie? What do we think of like the scenes of the Nazis and the way that the history of the period starts to creep into the main narrative of Cabaret? That was a part of the movie I had forgotten about. I was like, oh, okay, they really deal with what was happening at that time and the way that it, sometimes we're just with Sally and Brian, and then like they'll be outside and there's that chilling song that we get outside. You know, most of the songs are in the cabaret setting, but we get that song outside of that young man where Fosse he keeps it on his face until he starts panning down and you're like, oh my God. So like just that aspect of the movie and the way, I mean, it ends the film, the last shot, like how does that work for you? The way that the history of the period kind of seeps into the narrative.
I think my answer to this now would be a little bit different than it was maybe 10 years ago. I think watching this movie now, I feel like I have a more intimate understanding of what it means to be kind of living your life and doing things you love and just trying to, you know, get ahead or, you know, embrace, you know, she wants to sing, I want to talk about movies, whatever. and at the same time be sort of immersed in this political unrest that you have no control over whatsoever, and just sort of watching the culture and your country change in a way that you find really abhorrent, and sort of trying to find your place within that and how you deal with it personally. I mean, she's sort of ignoring it and I don't want to ignore it, but I just think like I understand that disconnect, and like that is really striking to me now. Because I mean, those scenes feel new. They feel in a way that is like kind of scary. And yeah, it's really striking to me.
Yeah, I just feel like it makes the movie richer. I feel like it was only about Sally and Brian and it didn't have that element. I feel like the movie would be really strong, but yeah, it does add this extra element to the story that just gives it really puts you in the place and time of history. And like, and it's always kind of just in the background. I mean, we get some moments, we get Brian, of course, getting hurt. We get that song outside that, I mean, that song goes on a long time and you're just like slow. It's like the slow realization of what's happening. And it's so terrifying. Like that scene is one of the most memorable in the movie, I think, of just everybody joining in on that song outside. It's you know, that's an interesting scene too. So yeah, so that element of the movie works really well. Any other musical numbers you wanted to touch on that you love that we haven't talked about? I mean, there's a bunch. I mean, there's what, at least 6 or 7 in the cabaret, more than that?
Yeah. I mean, they're all just so well done. It's I think I would definitely encourage people, if they have an opportunity to see the stage version, to do that, because there are some great songs that don't appear in this movie or that sort of appear in vague hidden ways that are really great. And I you know, wish more people would know them. And I think like the ending song Cabaret is really interesting because, again, like this goes to her kind of being a little bit miscast. Like she doesn't really perform that song the way it's supposed to be performed, but that's kind of okay, I feel, because she's so good at it that it kind of doesn't matter. You sort of lose track of it. But I love all of them. And sort of going back to what we were talking about before, they're just so well choreographed. And the stage, it's not a big stage. There's not a ton of, scenery machinations or anything crazy going on. He's just so smart about how he choreographs and how he edits. And I think that's really great.
Yeah. I mean, her final number in the movie is just outstanding. And I feel like, this movie is really just an astonishing showcase for her. I mean, we get all of the singing and dancing. She's so funny at times. She makes you laugh throughout this movie, but she's also just so real. And I feel like, would you say her Oscar scene is that post-abortion scene? That might have been my favorite scene of the movie. The way that is acted, the way it's shot, like kind of the way that Brian is not being physically violent with her in his disappointment and in his rage, and the way that she's trying to make light of what she did, but she's so obviously personally affected by it. The way Liza Minnelli plays that scene, I just think is just unbelievable. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous.
Yeah, the tears at the end, but not in a way that's forced at all. Bob Fosse goes in for a tight close-up on her face, and you can just really see the pain there. So I just thought that scene was just really well handled in every regard. Let's see, and it's followed right up with him leaving. And I feel like one of the most memorable moments of the film is her wave that she gives without her face on camera, like from her back. She does that wave with her fingers. I just thought that was like so great. I mean,
that in itself is just like the most interesting character choice of just like how she's choosing to deal with this rejection. Is like she can't look at the past. Everything for her is like tomorrow.
Yeah.
She's just gonna try to ignore anything that hurt her or makes her feel bad. Yeah, it's interesting.
So anything else you wanted to say about Liza Minnelli in this film? Any other anything else about her performance or kind of what she brought to this?
I mean, I know we'll talk about like how to pair this film with other films later, but I do think another way that you could think about this is looking at the past to see like where she was drawing inspiration from. And I know that she had conversations with her father about how she would play this role.
Right.
And he, as I sort of hinted at before, directed her toward Louise Brooks. And I think that was really smart, unsurprisingly from him. But yeah, I mean, I would also recommend watching Pandora's Box, which is from I think like 1928,
29, somewhere on there
or so. Yeah. Which was made in Berlin, starring Louise Brooks, who is from Kansas or something. So she kind of feels like Sally Bowles, but who just gets in like worse situations, basically. It's an excellent movie if you're like silent curious. It'll hold your attention, I promise.
Oh, that's a great recommendation. Yeah, obviously her father, Vincent Minnelli, very famous film director. Her mother, Judy Garland. I mean, wow. I mean, just two heavyweight talents that she had as parents. And Vincent Minnelli, I was looking at his filmography recently, and there's a lot of films he made I have not seen. Every year I study the work of a director, and I haven't decided yet who I wanted to do. I'm thinking of maybe doing Vincent Minnelli because he has so many movies I've never seen before. And the ones I have seen are great. So yeah, it would make sense that he was coaching her around this time. He was still active. He just made a film with Barbara Streisand, and I believe he had one more movie after that stars Liza Minnelli, right, in 1976. I want to say,
I think
that he directed Matter of Time. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's really fantastic, and that he was able to kind of at least kind of coach or guide her on this performance. That would make sense at the time. So a few final pieces of trivia about the movie. The film was very successful at the box office, and did very well. One of the top earners of the year, and it was well received by critics. It earned 10 Academy Award nominations in total and won 8 of them. And then this was the other crazy figure that, like, the fact that Bob Fosse won Best Director for Cabaret He also won a Tony and an Emmy for directing in the same year.
I know, it's wild. It really is.
That is insane. And the one he won an Emmy for was with Liza Minnelli too, right?
Yeah, that's the televised Liza with Izzy.
Liza with a Z. So yeah, now I'm like really curious to see that, because I guess it aired the same year. It's aired in 72.
Yeah, I think it aired like very close to the Oscars, like a not insignificant probably campaign moment.
So I mean, just thinking, like, he had Sweet Charity come out in 69, flops, kind of down, like, oh, am I gonna get another job? And then in the same year he wins all three of the the trifecta of those awards for directing. Pretty astonishing.
I do think Sweet Charity kind of needs a reevaluation,
okay,
though, because a lot of people are like down on it, but I think it's really good. So I just, people should watch it for themselves, see what they think, but I like it.
Yeah, I don't think I watched it when I was looking at 69 films. I need to go back and watch it and do like a Fosse marathon. I mean, we have some great stuff coming up. We have he did Lenny with Dustin Hoffman and All That Jazz, and one more film, Star 80 in the 80s. So only five features as a director, right, for film.
Yep.
But boy, did he put his stamp on the film industry, the film community. His movies will live on, and this is probably his most famous, Cabaret. Although there's a lot of love, I know, for All That Jazz from 79 with Roy Scheider. So as we're kind of moving into our final two segments, anything else you wanted to say about Cabaret, Izzy, that we haven't talked about? Anything else about the film thematically, or any other performances or the directing that we haven't touched on?
Not specifically. I mean, I think I have gone through like several phases with this movie, in the sense that, like, I think you can be really attracted to its glitz. And I think just like the historical aspect of it has just hit me more and more as I've gotten older. I mean, especially like with our political situation now, but I also lived in Berlin for a year.
Oh, okay.
And when I was there, I read a lot of Christopher Isherwood's books and like read Berlin stories and all of that.
Oh, cool.
And so it was a really cool experience to just kind of see the scars of what he was about to see. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
he was there before everything happened in Germany, and like you can see the consequences of World War II like everywhere in that city. And like, it's just so strange to sort of be connected to that like intimately in a place when you're thinking about this movie. So I don't know. Yeah, I just think that's an interesting way to like watch and read things, is to like think about where you are. And I don't know, if you ever have a chance to do that, do it.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to read his Berlin stories. I studied abroad in Germany in 2005, and we spent a week in Berlin, so I have great memories from that week. But yeah, it's like the place of this movie, so important, the time period. I feel like you can watch this movie in so many different ways, as you touched on, right? You can just watch it as an entertaining, flashy musical. You can watch it as a Liza Minnelli star vehicle and just kind of like focus on her. You can look at it for Joel Grey's work and his performance in the movie, the historical aspect of it. I mean, you could watch it really in 10 different ways, right? That's why I think the movie lasts, and it has so much rewatchability for so many people.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, there are times when I'm just like having YouTube nights, and I'll just watch my favorite performances. And it's like, you can watch like maybe this time and have it completely be out of context. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you won't be thinking about Nazis when you're watching it. It's just a good movie or a good performance.
Yeah.
And that's interesting too.
Yeah. So this will definitely be in my top 5 of the 1972 films, which is weird to say since we're recording this in early January of 2022. This is the second film I've recorded an episode on, and I have like 49 more to go. So, but I just don't know how. I mean, looking at the list of all the films that came out in 72, I just don't know how many will be able to better this one. I mean, it's just an astonishing piece of work all the way through. I really had nothing negative to say about it, as you mentioned in the beginning, that it's one of your favorite movies. It just works so beautifully all the way down the line. The performances, the direction. If you haven't seen this movie in a long time, if you've never seen Cabaret, hopefully you've seen it since we just spoiled everything. But I'm predicting that you probably have seen it, but maybe you haven't seen it in a long time. Take a look at this movie for its 50th anniversary, which is very cool. All right, so that takes us to our final two segments, Izzy. The first one is the Divine Double Feature. When this movie ends, what would you recommend someone to put on right afterwards? It's maybe a little bit more modern. That would be kind of a cool double feature for a viewer.
So mine's kind of depressing, but I feel like that's fair for the way that this movie ends. But I picked Transit, which came out maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, I haven't seen that. What's Transit?
2 or 3 years ago. I don't know. I lost track of time over the pandemic, but Transit, maybe it's 2000. It came out in 2019.
Okay.
It is an adaptation of a book by, let me Google really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can't just Google Transit. That's not going to give you the movie. Just letting you know.
Is it a foreign film or is it an?
It's German.
Okay. Oh,
it's
German,
directed by Christian Petzold. It was adapted from Anna Sager's 1944 novel.
Okay.
And essentially, so it was obviously written during World War II. And it documents basically this guy's journey as he's like trying to get a visa to get out of Germany or to get out of Europe. Mm-hmm. More specifically. I think he's trying to get to Mexico. And so he's sort of running from the police. He's just holed up in this small town, like meeting other people who are trying to get visas, going through the bureaucratic red tape to get a visa, all these kinds of things. And like every person that he talks to has their own story and is sort of reflecting on why they're leaving and all this kind of stuff. What's interesting about this movie specifically and how Petzold adapted it is that it's not a period piece. It's filmed as if it were taking place in 2019. 2019. So like the cops are wearing, modern equipment. Mm-hmm. Everybody's in modern dress, like the cars are all modern, whatever. And so it sort of, I think strikes a tone that like feels like an extension of the end of Cabaret, where it's like, you already have taken for granted that like there's now a fascist regime. How are you going to deal with it? How do you get out of it? How has it affected your life? It's very meditative and it might be slow for some people, but it's all very like internal, like monologuing basically, but it's super compelling and like very tense at times. It becomes a love story eventually. And it just sort of hits on the same kind of existentialist, like fear of humanity that I think Cabaret kind of has as an undercurrent, so it's not a musical, obviously, but but I think it has some things in common with the movie.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, I'll add it to my list. That sounds really interesting. Transit from 2019. So check that out. Is it, if it's streaming anywhere? Do you have to?
It was on Amazon.
Oh, okay.
So I think it still is.
Okay.
I would guess that it's also on like Mubi or something.
Okay. Or maybe a Criterion Channel will scoop it up one day.
Yeah,
hopefully. Sometimes they have more modern foreign films.
Yeah, they have a lot of his movies already, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. That's awesome. So yeah, that's a fantastic choice. I went with something much more obvious. I just went with Chicago from 2002, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. Now, that is a film that has a lot of fast editing, so I don't know how you feel about Chicago. But I just felt like if you wanted to kind of see a little bit of like the evolution of the movie musical from the early 70s to the 21st century, I feel like Chicago has just great energy, a lot of style, an amazing ensemble cast, and it's a movie I've seen a couple times since I saw it in theaters. I really love Chicago. Do you like Chicago from 02?
Oh, I love Chicago.
Okay.
Sorry, I hit my mic again. I love Chicago. I mean, I think that's one of the earliest movies that I remember really loving. And I don't even know why I was allowed to even see it. Like I was probably 10 or 11 when it came out, but I was obsessed with it. Like I got the making of book about it at the library and I would like carry it around. I remember I also brought in the soundtrack because we were learning about jazz at school. And I went to a Catholic school and I was like, oh, there's an instrumental track we should listen to because it's jazz, like at the end of the soundtrack. And the teacher played it. And then she was like, I just want everyone to know, like, this was good music, but that movie is inappropriate. It does not have morals of like an upstanding citizen. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's that's a film that didn't win Best Director, but it did win Best Picture at the Academy Awards, Chicago, and Catherine Zeta-Jones won for Best Supporting Actress. I mean, Renee Zellweger was amazing in that movie. She was obviously up against a lot of great performances in that category. Nicole Kidman, which you've also done a video on, Nicole Kidman's year. And so that I feel like that movie, the songs are great. It was just a fantastic time at the movies, and I feel like it still holds up 20 years on. And I don't know what the movie will be, the musical, in 10 years from now. So if it's 30 years after Cabaret, I don't know what'll be 30 years after Chicago, but that's a great example of the more modern movie musical. I feel like that would be a really fun night to watch Cabaret and Chicago back to back.
And also, I mean, thinking about if we're talking about like connections between all of these things, like Bob Fosse's connection to Chicago,
right,
which is that he directed the original and choreographed the original musical, and was like famously pissed because it came out the same year as A Chorus Line, which basically like ate up the Tonys. Like the Tonys just loved A Chorus Line and completely ignored Chicago. And then Chicago was kind of a flop for a while. And then I think Gwen Verdon got sick and Liza Minnelli replaced her. And then like that's when people started paying attention.
Oh, okay.
Liza Minnelli was in it. So
yeah,
these things are all connected.
Because I know the movie was in development for a long time, right? Throughout the 90s. I want to say a lot of major stars were attached at some point. I think Goldie Hawn was attached at one point. Like there were some big
Fosse
stars.
wanted to direct it with Madonna and Goldie Hawn. Yeah. Which would have been fucking amazing. Oh my God.
Madonna and Goldie Hawn. Oh my God.
I don't know if he thought about them together, but he wanted, I know when I was researching for the Madonna video, he had said that he wanted her to play Velma, which is just like too good. Oh my God.
Yeah, he passed away young. Wasn't he 60 years old? I want to say I looked him up the other day. I think it was 1987 he died.
Yeah, he did die pretty young. I mean, I don't know what age he was, but he did kind of keel over one day. I mean, not for nothing, because he did not live a healthy life, but
right. You know. So yeah, I don't know if there had been before he passed away, if he had made a film version, I don't know if we would have gotten the O2 version, or if, obviously we get remakes and things here and there, but I feel like if he had made a version in the 80s, I don't know if we would have seen the 2002 version that we ultimately got. So sometimes I guess things just work out, but I really love to see them.
Because I would have said that about West Side Story too, like 2 years ago.
You were not confident that they would ever remake West Side Story?
Well, I honestly thought that they wouldn't, but I was wrong.
Yeah, I bring that up all the time on the podcast. Like I'll ask the guests, like if they were to remake this 50 years on, and sometimes the guest is like, they're not going to remake this, and it's like, you never know. I mean, even like the big movies you think they'll never touch again, like West Side Story, and
these days, these days, I trust no one.
Do you think Cabaret will ever be remade as a film?
I mean, I obviously hope not, but like. I don't know. I mean, I would not be surprised if like Ryan Murphy gets a development deal with Netflix tomorrow to do it. Like, I'm just so used to being like, oh, nothing matters. So
Sarah Paulson as Sally.
Yeah, for real.
We'll see. I mean, I don't know. Maybe in the next 10 years, we'll see a little something for Cabaret, but as of now, we have the fantastic original. All right. So moving into our final segment, Beyond the Flick, Liza Minnelli. I feel like this is the good film to talk about her career a little bit more in general. So, I mean, she's not in a whole lot of movies, but she's in a lot of other really terrific films. Like, what are your other 2 or 3 favorites of films that she appeared in outside of Cabaret?
I feel like I have pretty obvious answers, but New York, New York.
Yep.
Obviously
Scorsese.
his homage to the golden age musical.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously she has there's an episode of Difficult People where they go to Jersey and they describe New York, New York as a Frank Sinatra song. And then they're like, it's a Liza Minnelli song. And I'm like, that's how I feel about it.
Yes. So what do you like about that film? From 1977, I want to say?
Must be, yeah. I don't really know. I mean, it's a very long movie. I wouldn't say that I like love it in the sense that it's like one of my top, 50 or anything like that. But I do think it's great in the sense that Scorsese like knew how he wanted to use Liza Minnelli's gifts in a way that like a lot of other directors just sort of ignored.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because like that kind of film wasn't popular anymore. And I'm just really thankful that he was able to like find that vehicle for her, basically.
And in between Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, like 2 very different movies, he makes New York, New York with Robert De Niro and Liza Minnelli.
Yeah, I love him so much because he loves movies. And he wants you to know that. And he just wants to be a fan as much as he wants to be a director. And I think that's great.
Oh, yeah. Like Hugo, which was just a celebration of film and silent film. Just his work is just outstanding. So, yeah, I'm really happy that I guess he directed her in a second film. One of my favorite Scorsese movies is The King of Comedy. And I guess she did a scene for that movie that got deleted. What are you doing, Martin?
I know.
You see like her cut. You see her
cardboard. Thelma? Do we blame Thelma for that? No, I'm just kidding.
Thelma. Come on. What are you doing? No, because you see her like cardboard cutout like in Rupert Pupkin's, Robert De Niro's like basement that he shares with like of his parents' house or whatever. And you see like he wants to be, the king of late night. And I believe he has like a setup in his basement, like where you see Liza Minnelli's cutout. And I guess Martin Scorsese shot a scene where like she comes to life or something, and it got deleted. That's what it says on IMDb. But I'm like, ooh, I want to see that scene. So yeah, New York, New York. What else? She's got a few more titles here. What else do you enjoy that she's in?
To sort of talk about what we were hinting at earlier, I really like A Matter of Time.
Okay.
Again, it's not like a great movie, but I think it's just interesting for the cast of characters it brings together. Like this is late Ingrid Bergman as well.
Oh, cool.
Sort of playing like, I don't know, an eccentric older woman. And then obviously having Vincent directing is interesting. There's like a very brief cameo of baby Isabella Rossellini as well.
Oh.
She plays a nurse. So it's just, I think it's cool from that perspective, just to like see all of these people kind of in the same place.
Yeah, that was the final film, I believe, of Vincent Minnelli. 6 years after his previous film with Barbra Streisand, that Clear Day one. I can never remember the title, but
forever.
Yeah, you can see forever. With a pre 5 Easy Pieces, Chinatown, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Jack Nicholson acting in a film with Barbra Streisand. Let's see. So her debut was Charlie Bubbles with Albert Finney as director. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen it, no.
Okay. I get the sense she's not like in a big part of that movie, but I guess that was her debut. The film she made after Cabaret was Lucky Lady with Gene Hackman and Burt Reynolds. Have you seen that? I've not seen that one.
Yes. It's also not great.
Not great.
Well, okay. So here's what I would also say though about like to appreciate Liza. I think it's less about like looking at her filmography than it is her music career.
Right. Okay.
So like actually like parallel with Cabaret is Liza with a Z, which is on YouTube and you can watch that. And I would just consider that a film.
Cool.
It's like obviously directed by Fosse as well. So it just sort of feels like if you put all of the musical sequences in Cabaret, like next to each other, it feels like that.
Okay, so there's not
Um,
is there a story at all to that, or it's just her singing and dancing?
um, there's sort of like she'll monologue a little bit, so she'll like make
Mm-hmm.
it feel like, you know, the order of the songs is very intentional, you know, it's not just like a concert.
Okay.
But it's extremely well performed and obviously choreographed beautifully. um so, and I feel like that is much more entertaining than a lot of the films that she was put in.
Does she repeat any songs from Cabaret in that TV special, or is it other songs?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
she does a medley, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Some other titles. I haven't seen it in a long time, but the film she made with Dudley Moore, Arthur, one of her
Mm-hmm.
other more famous films. I remember really
Yep.
enjoying that. I saw that when I was younger. And the title I mentioned earlier, The Stairwell Cuckoo, if you're a Liza Minnelli fan, I feel like that's a film you should seek out. I really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed it. It's a really great story. She plays a very interesting character, her first Oscar nomination. So I would recommend that. And then my favorite outside of Cabaret would be New York. I just think that's a really terrific film. And I feel like that's like the 70s Martin Scorsese movie some people might have missed. So I feel like
Mm-hmm.
if you haven't seen that one, definitely check it out.
I also want to throw a bone to Stepping Out
Stepping Out, which I've
from
never seen.
1991.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I'm just gonna read some of the casts as to like sell hopefully at least two
Okay.
people who are listening to this on watching it. Okay, in this movie is Shelley Winters, Liza, obviously,
Yeah.
Jane Krakowski, Bill Irwin, Ellen Green, Julie Walters, and Andrea Martin.
Ellen
Okay, like
Green.
yes.
Oh my
If
gosh.
that is not enough to sell you, then I don't know what to tell you.
Was that her last starring role in a film? I want to say that's like 91. Is that when that came out?
Yeah, that around there. I'm not sure, but probably. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
remember anything else.
So in the last 20 years, I mean, she maybe has popped up in a few films, like in supporting roles, but I feel like she's done more TV, like Arrested Development. Of course, she was fantastic on Arrested Development.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel like in terms of her feature film career, I feel like late 60s into like the late 70s, early 80s, right? It was kind of like her key time in terms of like theatrical feature films.
Yeah.
Would you say? Yeah.
Yeah.
You have sold me on Stepping Out, Izzy.
Yeah, it's just a good time. Like, you know, it's not Casablanca, but it's fun.
Yeah, cool. I'll check it out. This has been so much fun to have you back on the podcast, Izzy, to talk about one of the most important films of 1972, Cabaret. I'd love for you to talk about your YouTube channel and tell all our listeners where they can find it if they have not seen it before. It's my favorite YouTube channel, and I'd love for you to talk about it.
Sure. Yeah. So on YouTube, I am Be Kind Rewind. And I talk a lot about women in film history. So like mostly actresses and sometimes directors from the 20th century. And yeah, it's a good time. We like to talk about the Oscars and comparing different versions of different films, deep dives into specific films. So there's a lot going on, and check it out.
Yeah, it's just extraordinary work that you're doing. I mean, I watched your Deborah Carr episode, and I mean, it was just amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. I had fun with that.
It made me want to seek out all of her films, and I watched just recently Tea and Sympathy, which just knocked my socks off.
Oh my god, I watched that again last night. I'm like,
oh, you watched it last
night? It's so bad. Yeah,
I was like, it's not every few months that I come across an older film that's now in my top 20, 30, 40 films. Like Tea and Sympathy is one I will be revisiting many more times. Yep. I just fell in love with it from like the opening scene all the way to the end, and she was just really great in that. So yeah, I just love the work that you're doing. You're an inspiration to me and so many of us, and it's just just a thrill to have you back on the podcast today. So thanks for being here, Izzy. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can check out my new YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video, where I'm talking about Oscar history and some of the films and actors that I love. So check that out. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.